Page 42. A Short Introduction to the History of Human Stupidity, Walter B. Pitkin, 1932. 1.5. The taboo is hereby annulled. Annul it though we may, men will persist in shunning morology. Other trends of the psyche sweep attention. For example, most instances of stupidity are dull and intelligent people cannot endure long pondering over dull things. There is little novelty and excitement in watching thickheads as they rove from befuddlement to befuddlement. Nor is there any cash profit in it, nor any fame. Thus the ego is hedged about with many defenses against exposure other than the taboo set up by stupid egocentrics. So, kind reader, scan these pages while they may be the only treatise on this subject for another 1,000 years. Words. The cleverest people would inevitably distinguish all varieties of stupidity most precisely. Stupid folk, on the other hand, would fail to see themselves as others see them and would blur all niceties here. So, I elect to report the words and phrases used to describe modes of stupidity by the cleverest of ancients and the cleverest of moderns. First, the old Greeks, then the Japanese, who resemble the Greeks much more than most Westerners realize. In matters of stupidity, the Greeks certainly had a word for it, no matter how subtle the shade of inframentality. But, if my informants can be relied on, the Japanese are quite as deft. To list the mere words here would, so it seems, serve no useful purpose. I prefer to discover in them the more striking tendencies of significance, for these alone may throw light on the problem of varieties. Like other languages, both Greek and Japanese sharply distinguish four aspects of stupidity. First, the lack of sensitivity, which resembles death, sleep, blindness, deafness, and torpor. Secondly, a state of confusion and the presence of any affair requiring observation and decision. Thirdly, low velocity, be it in the first sensory response or in some later phase of behavior. And, lastly, an inability to cut through to the heart of a situation or problem, which inability is, all the keener languages, identified with bluntness or lack of a cutting edge, as on a knife or sword. At different periods in the growth of wisdom, people distinguished these four aspects of stupidity variously. In the earliest times, of course, they were not held apart. Homer, for instance, tells us about the Zaxpavpi, the dull shaft that sorely needs sharpening to serve the warrior in battle before the walls of Troy. But when Herodotus wrote his strange history, men were using the word Zaxpes to mean deaf or deaf and dumb. In the glory of Athens prime, Sophocles applied the same word to the mind and then it meant stupid. Here, then, appear three of our four phase meanings in one and the same word, but at various eras. It was also Herodotus who passed from the word vtifj and its primitive meaning of sluggish, slow, torpid, to its intellectual phase. He used the term in the sense of stupid. Shading away from this meaning, yet palpably related to it, is that crisp word purge, whose early use referred to a slackness of body, such as in effeminate people or physical weaklings. Plato and Xenophon applied it to the mind, hence it became a regular term for stupidity. I suspect that there was often implied the lack of driving force which penetrates to the core of affairs. The regular word for slow is paws. Plato and others often use it in metaphor to describe a dullard. Our now popular word, moron, is pure Greek. It seems to be the most precise way of describing the inferior mind. Often it means a simpleton, but again a merely stupid man who need not be a downright fool. Euripides casts it into the neuter to express folly. This is the regular meaning of the cognate noun /akio, which also expresses silliness. Our own technical definition of a moron was, of course, never conceived by the ancients. We cannot go into the many subtler nuances of Greek without annoying most readers. Plato alone uses terms to fit particular forms of stupidity more numerous than many another language in its entirety can boast. The stupidity that results from mere slowness in recognizing and learning has its apt name in the immortal dialogues, phthwimto. So has the variety that results from total failure to learn. The historians and the dramatists further distinguish many elusive modes in which we see, but not clearly, the various basic meanings variously compounded. Euripides and Thucydides speak of euola as an all-around lack of grasp, while Aeschylus uses typhoia as the sort of stupidity rooted in lack of perception or defective observation. To this brief catalogue any Greek scholar can add another quite as long. The Japanese draw all these distinctions and many others to boot. Dan means blunt, without edge. Dantu is a dull knife. And so Dan na hito is a stupid person. Thus also with the synonym, Nibui it describes lack of cutting edge on a knife or sword, and the lack of mental keenness too. Oddly enough, the same word also covers all four of the phases of stupidity. Sometimes it means lacking in sensitivity, again slowness of mind, again bungling, and again lack of penetrating powers. The Japanese have also an excellent term which stresses one aspect of stupidity that is not well differentiated in English as manok, or blundering, but in the special sense of missing the time and occasion. This, you see, resembles the French, malapropos, but goes beyond the latter in emphasizing the stupidity that underlies such behavior. It is significant that a race so alert and nimble as the Japanese should use many words to describe varieties of speed and sluggishness in mental as well as in physical behavior. But it is even more striking that they use gwa meaning foolish or stupida as a humble word to describe oneself in polite conversation. Thus, in the opinion of stupid me, then too, they regard it as clever in business dealings to affect stupidity, on the ground that stupid people prevail in the world and can be dealt with most easily by persons who seem to be like themselves. So deeply does this belief strike down into Japanese thinking that they use shiromanoa a fool or dunsia to refer to a cunning fellow. Elsewhere we shall discuss the significant psychology. Let us leave Japan with the remark that there are 18 or 19 fairly common terms describing forms of stupidity in the language. Surely only a clever race could be S0 analytical. The Romans were manifestly less clever than Greek or modern Japanese. Their speech doth betray them. Our word fool comes from bellows by way of Rome. It means, then, a windbag, so it is by no empty metaphor that we speak of fools as windbags. The Italians said fall, taking it direct from the Latin fallis, which is a bellows. So far as our subject is concerned, then, fool is a crudely drawn, colorful, but blundering characterization. A windbag is an empty head, but what causes the emptiness, and of what sort is the psychic vacuity? From the Romans also we take over stupidity and merge in it the meanings of dullness, slowness, indifference, anesthesia, and inability to use what one knows. In this last sense we come upon a fresh contribution. From whom else could it have come but the English? It is a strictly pragmatic twist, yet profound. It has been most neatly phrased by the philosopher, John Locke, who in his essay on Human Understanding, written in 1690, wrote thus of the mind, it moves slowly and retrieves not the ideas that it has, and are laid up in store, quick enough to serve the mind upon occasions. This, if it be to a great degree, is stupidity. Now here is a feature which neither Greek nor Japanese observed. It is not insensitivity nor feeble perception nor mental confusion, but rather slowness and turning to account what one already possesses intellectually. Later we shall discover that this is a form of stupidity in which the English excel. Moreover, it grows in importance as our world becomes more and more complex. Slowness in sensing and perceiving is one thing, slowness in use is quite another. People who have not yet discovered the human mind and its ways are always merging in their own thoughts ignorance and stupidity. Few races have as little insight as the Arabs into affairs psychic, and their language reveals this dullness. They use jahil to mean ignorant and stupid. Apparently the original sense was wild or barbarous, for the modern Muslims apply the term to the pagan Arabs before Muhammad. Another Arabic word which stresses a little the lack of sensitivity is alimak. The root meaning is uncertain, and the meaning may be fairly recent, for aught I know. All over the world we find stupidity described as an animal characteristic. Yet it seems that the duller races do this most. I have not found any Greek nor Japanese nor English tendency toward this interpretation. If such exists, it is not common nor important. But the old Arabs, who themselves were not far removed from cattle, and the modern Germans, who are, to put it most charitably, heavy-witted, exhibit this light clearly. An Arab who is vague, befuddled, and perplexed is bahim. The root here means cattle in both Arabic and Hebrew. The Germans are fond of saying, dumm wie das Lieb wie, so dumm or wie dumm. This is not far removed from the French shading in unbaptized, nor from that old English phrase, as wise as Waltham's calf. To the world's understanding of stupidity the Romans contributed nothing. In fact, they seem not even to have borrowed all the niceties of Greek, in spite of the fact that all they ever learned of culture came from Hellenic teachers. All four of the chief significances we have already found in Greek and Japanese appear, of course, in Latin. Stultus describes a person who, in our old Yankee phrase, is sot in his ways. It apparently goes back to a root, sto, that is common to the Latin and early Germanic tongues and means to put in place. The implication is that the stultus is settled down in one position, like a great stone embedded in ancient sod, and thus cannot be moved by ordinary forces. Stupidus seldom means stupid, in the English sense. It normally means benumbed, or deprived of sensitivity. Thus it is used to depict one who is thunderstruck or confounded. But the cognate noun, stupor, is more often applied to insensibility that is native as well as occasional. Obtusus applies to a person who has been made blunt or dull. Here is the earlier meaning again, you see, of a tool that lacks edge and cutting power, or penetration. There is another meaning, closely related, which reveals the obtusus as one who has been pounded to the point of enfeeblement, but this is a derivative interpretation. Hebes, a close synonym, shows the same two meanings. These terms are all relatively weak, as well as fairly general in their application. That is, they describe mere dullness, without specifying the form in which it works out. Some other words, however, imply or at least suggest end results as well. Thus, the verb disipio describes a type of foolish behavior that is not based upon lack of primary sensitivity at all, but rather on a breakdown of the intellectual functions. It usually means to act without understanding and is often used to depict a sick man in delirium. Later we shall find that many cases deemed stupid turn out to be the results of high sensitivity which have become jumbled or senseless. This gives rise to an unfortunate confusion in interpretations. Another word, soakers, applies to that sort of stupidity which terminates in mere negligence, sloppiness, and the like. Another direction of affected sloth. Then we come upon stultus, a general term for foolishness, and, strongest of all, fatuous, which comes close to our word, feeble-minded. Finally, the Latins recognized that species of stupidity which arises from a defect in space-time perceptions. But they seem less clear about it than the Japanese, a more alert folk. An ineptus is a person whose thoughts and acts are misfits. He does either the right thing at the wrong place or time, or else the wrong thing at the right place and time. Hence he is tactless. I think it worth reporting that the Romans described a pedant as ineptus. Both Greeks and Romans appear to have noticed one aspect of the sensitivities which we moderns overlook. They felt the deep analogy between the flavor of salt and the impression which a clever, witty, facetious personality makes upon us. This lay back of Jesus' remark to the multitudes, "Ye are the salt of the earth." It runs straight through Greek and Latin even into modern Romance languages. Even the Portuguese of today calls a person insosso when he deems the fellow dull or silly. This word, insosso, is from the Latin, insulsus / which is the negative of sulsus. Sulsus means salted or salty, hence acute, witty, facetious, nimble-witted. So, you see, insulsus describes the dull, the witless and the slow of mind. The Greeks also felt the resemblance between sharp flavor in food and in personalities. Insipid things were, to them, strangely like stupid people. A flat mind surely gives off neither odor nor flavor. It cannot arouse positive responses in other people. The idea of insensitivity is deeply embedded in the North European languages. Our word clumsy is borrowed straightforwardly from the Scandinavian, klumsa, which means numb. Our word blunder appears in Old Iceland as blunta, meaning there to doze, to be drowsy. The suffix, ren, is a frequentative, so, when added to the root, the word blundering comes to signify to keep on dozing, to go on being drowsy, and the implied habit indicates a mental condition. The same word bobs up in Swedish and Danish. This notion of insensitivity merges with that of lack of penetrative power in our word blunt. This seems to come from the same primordial root as blunder, yet very early it developed the meaning of dull, in the sense used by Chaucer, lacking a sharp point, hence not penetrating. Likewise with dull we still preserve both senses in it. We say, John is a dull fellow and this axe is dull. So, you see, while men have never been keenly sensitive to the structure of stupidity, nevertheless they have groped and fingered in a few directions, always toward some one phase of Cyclops which has proved significant. To complete the literary scene, we must invent a new language of morology. The words of stupid men cannot encompass their stupidity. Page 48.